And you can stop holding your breath now. As you'll have seen a day or so ago, Apple launched the iPhone 5, cosmetically similar to the classic 4 and 4S, but with an aluminium rather than steel case, presumably for weight, a slightly stretched 4-inch 640p and thinner screen, and a faster processor. All well and good, but I really don't like the way Apple has eschewed the micro USB standard for another proprietary Apple connector, the Lightning port. You want a tiny adapter to connect up via a standard micro USB cable? That'll be £15 each, thank you very much. Licensed to blinking print money and totally unnecessary. Finally, there's LTE support, which is good, and no NFC support, which is very bad. The entire industry was relying on Apple to kickstart wireless payments. Maybe next year? HTC has announced the Desire X mid-tier smartphone that's otherwise distinctly attractive, with a 4-inch WVGA LCD display, dual-core 1 GHz processor, 768 meg of RAM, 4 GB of internal storage, microSD support, and Android 4. Essentially, it fits just below the One S. Am I the only one who likes the look of this? Back in Samsung's corner, there's the Galaxy Note 2. The specs are very high, with a quad-core 1.6 gig processor, 2 gig of RAM, NFC, LTE, and every other acronym you've ever heard of, a massive 3100 mAh battery, 5.5, yes, I repeat, 5.5 inches Super AMOLED 720p HD screen with 16:9 aspect ratio. This means that, despite the bigger display, the Note 2 manages to be narrower than the original, kind of like a bigger Galaxy S3. Oh, and there's a stylus, the S Pen. Useful if you invest time in learning what it can do, though I still think it's a gimmick. Motorola has launched the rather sexy-looking Razr M with a, quote, edge-to-edge Super AMOLED, quote, advanced 4.3-inch QHD display, dual-core 1.5 gig processor, 2000 mAh battery, NFC, and the other usual specs. With the Google ownership, we're now seeing some nice touches, like Chrome installed as the default browser, and virtual Android control icons which get out of the way for better media consumption in landscape mode. As with the other Razrs, there's the full Kevlar case and splash guard inside, keeping it fully waterproof. Of all the oddball smartphones I've reviewed in the last 6 years on the phone show, the Utano Barrier T180 has to be just about the weirdest. On the one hand, it's super ruggedized. Oh boy, is it rugged. We were testing it around the house and my daughter said, "Can I drop it in a sink of water?" "Sure," I said, followed a moment later by, "Careful not to break the sink." 5 minutes later, the stakes were upped. "Can I throw it down the stairs?" "Sure." "Careful not to break the mirror." You get the idea. The biggest danger here is to the surroundings of the Utano Barrier T180. Short of attacking it with a power drill with fresh drill bits, this thing can withstand any combination of shock, dust and water. By far the weakest spot is actually the screen, despite being Gorilla Glass. I guess I could shatter it with a pickaxe if I wanted to. The first thing anyone says when they pick up the T180 is it in a case? Actually, that's a very good question, since peering into the data port and the audio ports, it's very evident at heart the Barrier is indeed the guts of a cheap and cheerful Android smartphone locked into multiple millimeters of steel casing and extremely tough plastic. The feel in the hand, though, is pretty superb in terms of confidence. The ultimate building site smartphone, the orange and black paneling is mainly cosmetic. Those screw holes and lanyard mounting points do show functionality as well. The rubberized sheet steel cover for the battery does give access to dual SIM slots. There's a very odd micro SD cavity that had me scratching my head for a minute until I worked it out, and a whopping 2000 mAh battery. It's all screwed into place though, so you will need to break out a toolbox to get access to any of these. The ports are so deeply buried in this mass of materials that you have to use the supplied Utano micro USB cable with extra long connector in order to reach the socket. You can't just use any of your existing micro USB cables, annoyingly. Rather oddly, the audio jack recess has this rather spurious wire just sitting there. What on earth is that for? On the left-hand edge is a dedicated torch button. This activates the LED flash, but rather sadly needs continuous pressure to work. Surely it should be an on-off toggle. Beneath the smallish 3.2-inch screen are Android control icons that aren't backlit. I know you'd get used to which ones where, even in the dark, but the lack of a backlight just annoys me. There are lovely large Nokia-style call, hang-up and home physical buttons that you can't wake the phone up from sleep by pressing any of these. Instead, you have to use the top-mounted, rather fiddly power button. Utano definitely missed a trick here. There's an overriding crippling problem, though, with the Utano Barrier. Look, I get that a super ruggedized phone is going to have some compromises. I wasn't expecting Galaxy S3. But the performance of this Android 2.3 device is terrible. It's got the innards of the very cheapest, lowest end, most budget devices. Even my 2-year-old Christmas stocking price T-Mobile Pulse Mini was faster than this. I'm not kidding. 4 seconds to take a photo. Gallery transitions so slow you can watch the thumbnails sliding into place frame by frame. An 800 megahertz single core processor, 320 by 480 pixel screen, and only 100 megabytes free on the system disk out of the box is just appalling for Android in 2012 at almost any price point. But for a super rugged phone, even this would be bearable if the functionality of the components matched the device's ambitions. Sadly, the exact reverse is true. Look, the Utano Barrier T180 is all about the great outdoors. Hiking, cycling, mountaineering, surfing, whatever you like to get up to. So you need 2 things, a clear screen in sunlight and a decent camera and camcorder for capturing all the wonderful things you're seeing. No, the Barrier has a display that turns into a mirror whenever the sun's out, and it has just about the worst phone camera I've ever used. Terrible pictures and a 3-second shutter lag. At over £300, I'm afraid the Barrier T180 is something of a joke. The concept's good, but better display technology and, well, better components all round are needed. Take the core phone, about 50 quid's worth at most. Add, say, £100 of ruggedization tech, and you get to 150. What's needed here is a true mid-range £200 smartphone inside, plus the casing to get to a similar asking price. In this form, I cannot recommend the Barrier to anyone. Get past the survivability novelty, and there's literally nothing else to like here whatsoever. My tour of the Nokia 808 and Symbian went down very well, and people have been asking for a similar look at how I use Android Jelly Bean here on the Galaxy Nexus. First of all, the home screen dock in landscape mode. I'll explain how I do that in a moment. First of all, let's just look at the home screens. I keep things fairly simple. Some stock widgets so I can keep an eye on the markets, my family contacts, news and weather, and my main home screen, the obviously Google power controls, dog catcher, my currently listening podcast. In terms of the other icons here, we've got my selection of games, my favourite being Virtual Pool Mobile and Pool Break Pro, of course. Yes, I'm a pool nut. Touch Calendar, which is my favourite of the different calendar apps because I can scroll around up and down, much like a wall chart. Very, very handy. Skype, of course, absolutely vital for keeping in touch with the All About Symbian office. Play Music, a rather odd name for the Android music player, but it does work very well. And of course, Google. I have all my different Google services all under one icon. It just keeps things nice and simple. Down at the bottom, my most used apps here are Contacts, of course, Dog Catcher, the podcast player. TweetDark, this is a AMOLED-friendly, dark-themed Twitter client. Really, really quite powerful and very, very pretty on the black of the Galaxy Nexus screen. And also at the bottom right, here we have Flashlight, which is just invaluable during the winter months, just to turn the LED flash on the phone. Moving across to my other home screens, we have the Jelly Bean gallery widget, of course. It's quite handy and a nice way into your photos. TV24 is a TV guide. This is ultimate rotation control, a utility that basically lets everything run in landscape if you want it to. So it's really handy. So you can really treat your Galaxy Nexus like a tablet. Let's move into my applications. There are a few worth noting here. Advanced Task Killer, really, really useful. You can set up the applications that you want to kill most often and then just basically kill them with a single tap, and then you get maximum RAM free, in this case 250 megabytes free. Astro is a file manager. You've probably heard of that. BBC iPlayer, of course. Bible.is is a spoken word Bible program. It actually speaks it to you if you say driving. Moving to my second page of apps, I'm sure you've all heard of Flipboard. Basically brings a magazine-like format to your RSS feeds and social media. Very neat indeed. HandySafe Pro, a secure database, is a bit of a dog here, and most of the icons look rather similar, but it does have all my secure information inside. iFixit, as it sounds, is a companion to the website, providing disassembly and repair for almost anything you can think of. Very, very impressive. Finally, I wanted to mention Volume Plus here, especially useful on the Galaxy Nexus. Provides a simple volume boost, in my case up to plus 10 on its settings, which basically makes the Galaxy Nexus speaker audible. So it's a pretty simple setup, a fairly bare bones effort, but it keeps me happy on Android. Everything's more or less as I like it, and I hope it's proved useful to you.